Українська оборона склалася. Бабух. Так, бабух.
Battle for Earth begins.
Anything else that might get in the way of our ideal must be destroyed immediately.
The ultimate enemy has arrived. The enemy will be another month. Their single purpose: destroy our world.
I'm sure God would understand the steps we're taking.
Those who oppose them, die.
Let me repeat that. If this mission fails, if we are unsuccessful, we have no future.
We've had enough! Isn't it about time that people realize the ones posing the most threat are none other than yourselves?
This is not me. This result is natural.
What this is war.
Commence destruction.
Now, these pirates will shake the foundations of the Alliance and change the course of history. If they can stay alive,
Those Gundam pilots are desperate. No matter even if it means forfeiting their lives. Mission accepted. Of course not.
Just like it is with the stars. There are bright ones and there are those that are dim.
both sides prepare for the final battle. Suit up.
Nothing good can ever come from staying with normal people.
Be very careful.
Mankind has reached the stars.
There has to be some form of punishment.
Love the women that faithfulness me. Those are the ones that love me.
Time out! Get set! And go.
But I'm surging with women. Hillary Clinton is a bigot. He would not be my first choice, that I can tell.
You think you'll be in jail?
Would I approve waterboarding? You bet your ass I'd approve.
And I'd bring back a hell of a lot worse than waterboarding.
Go home to mama. This system is rigged.
Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
I guarantee you there's no problem.
I think we should take a drug test prior to the debate. I never heard that one before.
Circuitry and metal, cold and emotionless, carry out tasks without conscience. Robots, thousands, programmed for destruction. March towards the future is coming. Man's greatest inventions, making the impossible possible, are no longer under our control.
Technological strength will just become a threat to the Earth.
This new breed of technology makes humanity obsolete. Robots, thinking, acting on their own, begin their march toward domination. These machines, built by man, serve no one. The robots among us, watching, waiting, calculate their new world order. Their time is coming. They cannot be stopped.
Attention, strange weapons are approaching. Attention, strange weapons are approaching.
With perfect weapons and superior intelligence, robots will rule this planet. Let the fall of mankind give way to a new age.
This new mudball of a man is doomed anyway.
Universal Century 0079. The 1-year war rages on. Space Noids against Earth dwellers.
I'm gonna try to see our forces right off the Earth.
Seek against fate.
Not bad for a Betty, but I bet you're not ready for this.
As both sides prepare for the final battle.
Run for it!
The secret love of two enemies may be mankind's only hope for peace.
Feeling it, you believe you can still fire at the enemy?
They're no better than they are. Again.
the right to dream. There are endless possibilities stretched out before you.
And trust in your own power.
Whatever happens from now on, you stand firm and face your destiny without fear, but with courage.
What awaits him down the path, he will then have to choose.
No one's gonna give you a map. You've got to walk your own path.
The children leave their homes in search of this quest.
What is thy desire?
As they search, they are always asking questions. What's out there? What's waiting for me?
Why was I made? Who made me? And what did they make me for?
You gonna go up into space with your old man or not? Maybe I'll never get over this. I've lived my life following my dreams, and I don't have any regrets.
You gonna just keep running away?
Just keep running away? I'm not running.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Believe in yourself and create your own destiny. Don't fear failure.
Excuse me, bro. You're excused.
I'm not your bro.
There we go. As I was saying, we're going to talk about intelligence, which it comes in many forms. It comes in many forms. I would argue, personally, that microphone intelligence is probably the most elusive. I can't think of more than 5 people off the top of my head that can remember to unplug and plug their mic in back before the show starts. You know, and you might say, oh, people aren't doing live streams. Like, you know, most people are working in a mine or whatever. And, you know, everyone has their opinion. Opinions, they differ from person to person. And my opinion is that I'm okay and that everyone. My opinion is that I'm actually a nice guy. You know, it doesn't really matter. Some of these other things that people are saying doesn't really matter. Just a nice guy. And that's what really matters, is that you're a nice guy. Going over some of the things I was talking about, I said, welcome to the show. Once again, Controlled Substance back here on a Thursday. I am Orphan, taking you through some of the red pills. Some of the red pills on IQ, the intelligence quantum, I believe is what it stands for. Intelligence quantum. And we're going to talk about some things. We're going to mostly just learn together. We're going to maybe watch some old Jordan Peterson, some old Rabbi Peterson videos. He sucks now. It really feels like Jordan Peterson after his benzo fallout, he just decided it wasn't worth it to continue pushing himself so hard or whatever, and he just like reached out to Daily Wire and just decided to like sign on the dotted line. But that being said, some of his old lectures are really good. I rewatched one of these before the show, and I'm like, man, I forgot how cool Jordan Peterson used to be. No longer, but you know, everyone goes through different seasons in their life. I hope that the Daily Wire season in Jordan Peterson's life is a short-lived one, but we'll see. It's tough when you're making $10 million a year for no reason at all. Okay. Well, I don't really have this show structured in terms of pills today, so we're probably just going to stay on. We're going to start off on the blue pill. I want to show you guys something. Check this out real quick. All right, one sec. Let me hook up the browser. Have you guys seen this Globe? This new concert venue in Las Vegas? It's crazy. Check this out. Whoops. Okay, this is not it. Check this out. So this is a concert venue. It's a new concert venue. It's called the Las Vegas Sphere, I think. I think that's what it's just called. But basically, those are all LEDs. It's a giant dome covered in LEDs, and they've been playing all sorts of different stuff on it. Let me see if I can find some more videos. Fantasy Dome. Is this it? The Ultimate 4D Journey. I don't think this is. Let's just search that. Okay, here, check this out. So that's a real structure in Las Vegas right now. How crazy is that? It looks awesome. It's probably a little trippy if you're like, if you have. What if you had a hotel room where this guy's filming from? I mean, I'm assuming this is a hotel room. You wake up in the middle of the night, middle of your sleep cycle. You're all groggy and scared, and you look out your window and you see this. They're probably going to have a lot more suicides in Las Vegas. That's what I would imagine. It's really cool, though. They did a globe. They did an ad for basketball. All sorts of cool stuff. I think it's sweet. I wonder what the inside looks like. I haven't seen any inside pictures. And it's really cool that they can put whatever they want on it. You can get real creative with a giant dome LED screen, you know? So, that is that. Just wanted to show you guys that because I thought it was pretty cool. All right, next up. So, I don't know much about this guy, but I was doing a little research. William M. Briggs. So, I don't know who this man is. I don't know what he does. It says he's a statistician. He also seems to be red-pilled to some extent. But he has some interesting articles from a statistics perspective on IQ. And I want to show you guys also why I originally thought this would be an interesting topic. So check this out. This was an old 4chan post, a green text post. Not that anon, but I have IQ pills from. Not that anon. Okay, IQ pills from a thread in text will dump. So I did IQ research as a grad student, and it involved a lot of this stuff. Do you know that most people, so 95%, with less than 90 IQ, can't understand conditional hypotheticals? For example, how would you have felt yesterday evening if you hadn't eaten breakfast or lunch? What do you mean? I did eat breakfast and lunch. Yes, but if you had not, how would you have felt? Why are you saying that? I didn't eat breakfast. I just told you that I did. Imagine you hadn't, though. How would you have felt? I don't get it. I don't understand the question. So this is less than 90 IQ. And less than 90 IQ that's like really a lot of people. The average IQ is 100. So that's not even one standard deviation below an average IQ. Let me see. What percent of the population, the global population, do you think is under 90% or under 90 IQ? Let's try and find this. (90 IQ). Dude, Quora is the worst website. I hate that website. Okay, your IQ score. I have 90 IQ. 25th percentile. So 25% of the globe, right? This is worldwide. I assume this is worldwide. Fluid intelligence, best predictor of academic occupational success. Okay, so I just guess I guess it's the world. Okay, so let's just take that. 25% of people have an IQ lower than or equal to 90. So that means 1 out of 4 people on this planet literally can't imagine how they would feel if they didn't eat breakfast yesterday. How they would feel in the evening if they had not eaten breakfast earlier that day. That's a quarter of the world's population. Okay? So just let that sink in for a second, because that number is mind-boggling. When I first heard this, I'm like, okay, well, there can't be that many people with that low of an IQ. And then you look it up.
I hope I don't ruin it with my bad attitude.
You look it up, and then that's way too many people. That is a very, very simple hypothetical. Okay? So that's a problem. To go on further, I don't know if I have it saved here. Just other 4chan threads. I don't even know what iFunny is. Is this a good website or not? There's another one. I'll summarize it. I think once you get up to 100 IQ, that's when most people can. They use the example of recursion, and the example they used of recursion was you write a story with 2 characters, and each of them have dialogue from their own perspective, and then that recurs into those 2 people in that story. You then write them to each be talking about 2 people who have their own dialogue, and the more abstract you get down the line, I think the higher IQ it takes, so you don't get completely jumbled. But I think that It's either the first or second level of recursion. I think it's the first. 100 IQ people basically can't do. So if I'm understanding correctly, a 100 IQ person cannot write a story with two characters, each of those characters talking about two other characters having a conversation. So that's just like 4 people deep. You end up with 4 at the bottom of that branch. And they just can't do that. And so oftentimes when you're talking about like political arguments, when you're talking about like the inevitability of certain things, you're talking about demographics and holding individuals and demographics as a duality. You're talking about policy change. Like you're either talking to high IQ people or you're getting misunderstood. And so this is why political discourse is such garbage right now, because for some reason, mostly the internet, mostly the interconnectivity of the global population, politics has become a normal topic of conversation for average people. And if you're talking about average people, then you're talking about most of the population is at 100%. That's what the average there means. And then you go to standard deviation below, and you're even worse off. So you're looking at like 75% of the population literally cannot grasp some of the ideas that you're talking about. The consequences of hypothetical actions. 75% of people just can't get that. Yet, we're supposed to have a republic democracy where people all have informed decisions and choose how they want to run the country. And you start to see where that breaks down. I mean, that is if you're over 100 IQ. If you're below 100 IQ and you're watching this show, you're probably going to have a hard time. You're probably going to be first off really mad. It's like that 40-year-old virgin clip. He's like, I don't know the words you're saying right now, so I'm going to take him as disrespect. But I mean, you start to realize why the conversation on Twitter is so garbage. So the question then becomes, and we'll probably get into this a bit later, is like, okay, what level of the conversation needs to happen? Or do you even need this 75% of people to understand what you're saying? And obviously, country per country is a different stat entirely. I think the average in the United States is like 110. And so you're talking about different calibers of people. But that's why I don't want to get into today. I want to see, like, is this innate? Is it as flexible as people want to believe? And from a gut check, if you're completely disregarding any sort of emotional feeling, it's like, I don't see how people can't be born with different IQs. It doesn't make any sense. If you're born with different genetic potential, then not everyone is going to be equal. Pretending that everyone is equal, it just can't exist. Where does that exist in your life? People are better at sports. People are smarter. People are better at reading. People are just different. So why would that not be baked in your processing power? And there's also things on top of that. I like to think of it as processing power and as a computer, because most people know how computers work these days. You have a computer and your hardware caps your limit at a certain point. You can obviously go below that and not use your full hardware. And you can overclock it a little bit, but there's a band that you're working within, right? You work too low and your computer just won't work properly. You overclock it too much, you might overheat and it's not sustainable. So there's a mean where your computer works because of its hardware. That's IQ. But then you start to talk about things like, well, there's different types of intelligence as well, but that's a separate topic. So in this reference, you start to think, okay, well, my hardware is set a certain way just for being born. I have no control over that. You have control. You can either learn more, go to school, increase that bandwidth a little bit, or you can watch porn and jerk off all day, and then your bandwidth goes lower. But then there's also the problem of what kind of software are you running on your computer. So if IQ is your hardware, and software is your worldview, is your nurturing, is your surroundings, your friends, your loved ones, all these things that would nurture you into a better person, that also has to be taken into account. Because you can be running Minesweeper on your computer, or you can be running a 3D rendering program. These will give you different outputs. And so, as with everything, it's not one or the other, but ignoring the fact that you can't run software without hardware doesn't make your computer go. You know what I mean? You have to acknowledge that certain people are born with certain capabilities, and that's not a bad thing. It's just the way the world works. So let's dive in a little bit. Let's go into this. William M. Briggs, statistician to the stars. I hope that's true. I have no idea if it is or not, but I hope I hope celebrities are needing statisticians these days. This article is called "Academics Throw Fit After Being Told They Don't Throw Fits Over IQ and Race." This isn't the one that I wanted to read first off. The first off one I wanted to read is here. The hierarchy of intelligence and IQ were not as smart as we think. So let's work our way through this a little bit. Can you guys see this on screen pretty well? I want to make sure it's legible for you guys. Let's think about degrees of intelligence, specifically our knowledge of them. Now, many believe that intelligence, vaguely defined, can be quantified to good or even ideal degree with IQ. I do not. All the reasons why I think not are in the article, The Limitations and Usefulness of IQ, so I won't repeat them here. Nobody has an IQ like they do height. They have a score on a test at a given time under certain circumstances. Relying on an IQ as a complete quantification is to guarantee over certainty. However, IQ has some use. It is a rough guide to a certain kind of intellectual operation. But, as the linked article and this one will show, it can be no more than that. With that out of the way, let's look at a summary of a thread on Twitter, which provides a reasonable summary of certain intellectual operations. There is nothing special about the thread. The information is available in many resources, but this one is succinct. Because threads disappear, this originated as Reddit, I'll repeat all the pertinent information here. So most people with 95 IQ, so this is the 4chan that we just read. How would you feel if you didn't eat lunch? And it goes between lunch and breakfast and dinner. I don't know what it is, but the premise is all the same. Oh, here's recursion. So, write a story with 2 named characters, each with 1 line of dialogue. Most literate people can manage this, especially once you give them an example. Write a story with 2 named characters, each with 1 line of dialogue. In this story, one of the characters must be describing a story with at least 2 named characters, each of whom have at least 1 line of dialogue. If you have less than 90 IQ, the second exercise is basically impossible. Add a 3rd level frame to the story, and even 100 IQs start to get mixed up with the names of who's talking. So this is basically what I surmised, or summarized. The limitation is well documented. I trust all my regular readers have no problem whatsoever with these forms of reasoning, nor with time, which cannot fathom beyond the immediate, or which some cannot fathom beyond the immediate. The tweeter also lists the ability to put yourself in another's shoes, as it were, which might indeed be lacking in some, but the evidence here is not as clear. Much of this evidence comes often from people who are not necessarily remorseful for crimes, but not from the loving multitude who never become noticed. So we needn't believe this. I don't know how. A lot of times, what people will do is they'll detract from observations without, because there is no clear evidence. But how would you ever gather evidence for this? Their capability versus their unwillingness to remorse. A lot of things happen. Like women drivers is a good one. A lot of people will say women drivers aren't as bad as men, aren't as bad of drivers as men. And then you say, well, every time I've driven with a woman, she's like distracted and like runs over a curb or something. And they're like, well, crash statistics say that men crash more. It's like, yeah, because they're going 800 miles an hour trying to show off for people. But then they'll say, well, the data supports my theory. And so there's no data for yours, and so your argument's invalid. Even though everyone gets in the car with their mom and realizes, what the fuck have I gotten myself into? Why are moms allowed to drive children around? Like, they're always crazy. There's very few women drivers who are good because they're thinking about other things. Men are autistic. Men, like, look at the steering column and they think about the fastest way, the most efficient way to get somewhere. Women are thinking about like what other people in the car are doing and like. But just because there's on a paper, because it's unquantifiable, doesn't mean it's not true. Like, your personal experience needs to factor in here somewhere. So, I don't know that I completely agree with dismissing this because of lack of evidence of that. I mean, if someone can't hypothetically imagine what they themselves would feel like, then how are they going to imagine how someone else feels when you commit a crime on them? It's like, that just makes sense. So, I don't know why you would need to dismiss that. Next is mapping, which in abstract reasoning is expressing one thing in terms of another. For example, imagine a picture of an arrow, colored in a gradient from yellow to green, following the direction of the arrow. Imagine a one-way street with ascending house numbers, lowest at the entrance, highest at the exit. If you mapped the arrow onto the street, what color would house number 1 be? Can you do it? Can you do it? So there's an arrow, gradient from yellow to green. Map it on the street with houses in an ascending order, where the entrance is the lowest, highest is at the exit. So what color is house number 1? This isn't tricky for most 100 pluses. It has some minor ambiguities, but anyone of normal intelligence can do mapping, that is. The expression of one thing in terms of another. However, for sub-90s, it's very difficult. They struggle, and sub-80s just can't do it at all. The fact that there are even sub-80s that exist blows my mind. It's the same way that you realize that some people don't have internal monologues. I don't know what the percent is, but there's a minority of people who don't have internal monologues. So they're reading something. They cannot hear a voice in their head. They don't hear themselves talking to themselves. They guess they can't have conversations with themselves either. I don't understand it because it's so key to how I think. And from what I understand, that's how most people think. So I don't know. But when you start to learn things or at least listen to people about how they perceive their inner world, it's quite eye-opening because you start to realize, okay, well, if 25% of the world's population literally can't, like their brain literally cannot process not having breakfast and then being hungry in the evening, democracy's not a great system for that, you know? So if you accept that reality, all of a sudden, what we're doing is really not a great idea. You shouldn't give people who can't imagine not eating breakfast the power to vote on equal weight as like a Mensa inductee. You start to kind of things start to unravel pretty quick, and particularly they start to unravel when it comes to liberalism and it comes to well, I was going to say like equality, but you know, that's where we get into different types of intelligence and different types of value, which we'll talk about later. But in terms of understanding policies, like large implication policies on a nationwide or global scale, it's like you should not even be talking to people who are less than 90 IQ. They are not even capable. It's like asking someone who can't ice skate to play substitute in a hockey game for you. It's like, we need hockey players for that, bro. we can't have you just jump on the ice with your shoes. Like you're just not qualified. If you want to win the game at all, if you have any hopes of winning the game, you need to know how to ice skate before we put you on the team. So, no fault of their own, and no detriment to them as a person, but certain people are tailored for certain things, particularly when it comes to leading our society. Okay, back to the article. The way we also think of the power to create analogies, but this is enough. There are also niceties to all these constructions, as is obvious. We'll let these pass too. What should be clear, ignoring the IQ quantifications, is that a person who cannot fathom recursion doesn't understand recursion. Not understanding it, he cannot form an idea of how it feels, what it's like to have this power, as it were. Those of you who can grasp recursion feel this power and know its nature. It is certain your dog, which is an intelligent creature, as long as we're being loose with, quote, intelligent, cannot do recursion. Grab a drink real quick. The dog doesn't have the intellect man does. It cannot know what it's like to be a man and have his power. Nor can it know the power of speech, a form of intellection and all that flows from it. And then even a bee knows how to find its way back to the hive, and it has almost no mind at all. On the other hand, there are certain people, Newton for instance, who we call geniuses. People whose power of thought soars beyond anything we can do, whose way of thinking we cannot grasp, but whose effects we can appreciate. Be careful. Here we are not interested in why these things are so, the causes of them. These causes must be present. We don't have to know what they are to know that they are. So feel free to pick any of your favorite explanation. As long as you come to the conclusion there is a hierarchy of intelligences, which is an undeniable observation. Many high IQ people, especially in our decadent culture, feel mighty proud to be in the class that, for instance, understands recursions. Of course, many who say they cannot, though they are well credentialed, they allowed themselves to feel superior. Just making sure I read that right. Which in the matters of recursion anyway, they are. But it does not follow at all that they are therefore superior in all things or in toto. After all, a dog cannot do recursion, while any man is superior to a dog in this, none would claim superiority in all things over a dog. I would. I think I can do most things better than a dog. I mean, maybe you're talking... This dude's saying dogs are better than him? Shit. This dude thinks dogs are better than us. I just imagine, can you imagine a less than 90 IQ person reading this article? First of all, if they can read, and they can read words like this. Imagine someone was like reading this out loud to them. Like, dude, shit, this dude thinks that dogs are smarter than us. And this is where we get into quantification too. And he was saying up above, like, there's different types of intelligence, and there's also, it's hard to tell where it comes from. I mean, obviously it comes from God, but quantifying that is a little bit more difficult. Have you ever thought about where your ideas come from? I'm going to take this tangent because it's one of the most fascinating ideas of all time to me. Is where does a new idea come from? What is that? Because it's new to you, so it couldn't have come from within. It must have come from without or from something outside of your control. Does it come from like subconscious? And if that's the case, does subconsciousness, does that have knowledge that you don't have. Or maybe if you're looking at it from a materialist perspective, do novel ideas come from random atoms smashing together in your brain in a certain way based on the concoction of your life, your genetics, and your experience? Does that just synthesize new ideas? It's really interesting when you start to think metaphysically about what that means. And there's ways also, and any artist will tell you, that you can coax these ideas through meditation, through prayer, through nature, through any connection with something that's real and unified. You get a higher yield of these ideas, and they're more potent too, right? Sometimes you'll get like a smell, like an aftertaste of an idea, but sometimes you'll get a very clear picture of what needs to happen. And is that just coming from your spinal cord? Is that coming from God? Are we antennas? It's really interesting, particularly from the lens of an artist. But I digress. This man's talking about how dogs. He said, after all, a dog cannot do recursion, and while any man is superior to a dog in this, none would claim superiority in all things over a dog. So I'm assuming he's talking about here that dogs can run faster than humans. I guess. Which is true. But if we're talking about intelligence, then... And this is where it gets a little tough, too, because intelligence is... IQ, particularly, is such a high indicator of human success in multiple categories. So, let's continue. Let's see if he answers it. Take a little spin drift break. How are you guys doing tonight? Hope everyone's doing good out there. Hope everyone's respecting their dogs. If you're not, then you're a bigot. Here's the kicker. The grand conclusion. As smart as you are, Mr. Expert PhD, you do not know what you cannot know. Nobody can. That there is a hierarchy of intelligences, well observed, implies, via induction, our strongest form of reasoning, that there are ways of thinking, modes of intellection, beyond which we can understand. This is true in the small, when we cannot fathom how geniuses think, but also true in the large. Not knowing what these kind of intelligences are like, we cannot test for them. We therefore cannot measure them. For that reason alone, IQ is incomplete. We can't know what these higher forms of thinking are, or are like, in the same way a man who cannot understand recursion cannot know what recursion is like. He may form the idea that ability has certain manifestations, which he can see, but he knows he cannot reproduce them or understand the whys behind the power's use. And that's a really important point as well. So when you're talking to people, with some people you'll be able to explain ideas to them if they're open-minded. You'll be able to explain a higher level idea than they would be able to come up with on their own. I wonder how this looks in the breakfast terms. It's what if you said if you didn't eat breakfast, would they be able to just remember that, but then they wouldn't be able to replicate it for dinner? I'm trying to think what that looks like, but the point is here that you can explain certain ideas to people, but they cannot replicate those ideas. So you can explain to them in one instance why homosexuality is a sin and should not be permitted. And then they will take that and they will be able to repeat that. They'll be able to kind of mimic your ideas, your thought process, but they will not be able to, the next time liberalism and individualism, next time that rears its ugly head and causes the same problem, they will not be able to link those two together because they can't think on that level. I think that's what I'm understanding here. It's the same with us high IQ people, we're so busy congratulating ourselves we forget that we could very well fit in the overall scheme of things like dogs do with us, or bees. Now, many of you won't believe, though, this late date, it's hard to see how, in angels... Are angels and angles spelled the same? A-N-G-L-E-S would be angels. This isn't the place for it, but the idea is that each angel is a different species. Each has intellectual powers that others don't. The hierarchy we've posited extends upward in these created beings all the way to the highest created being. This created being is not nice, which shows the power of intelligence does not imply goodness. The smartest being is the evilest. We too have seen all throughout history that the greatest evils arise from the very intelligent. Is he talking about God here? Saying that God's not nice? Because that doesn't even make sense. Infinity, as I often say, is unimaginably big. You can spend forever traveling to get there and never arrive. So there's lots of rooms for an infinitely graduated hierarchy. But as it is written, eye hath not seen nor ear heard, neither have entered to the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. Cockiness, then, about how brilliant we are is out, or should be. Okay. So, it's a really interesting article. I kind of lost the plot at the end there when he was talking. I understand the fractal nature of infinite hierarchy, but I don't agree with his statement that the top of the peak is always evil. The created being is not nice, which shows power of intelligence does not imply goodness. It's like, okay, yeah, obviously. Intelligence doesn't imply goodness. It's just like brain power. But he said that specifically after talking about angels and the highest. I mean, is he talking about the fallen angel? Is he talking about Satan? If that's the case, then I get it. If he's talking about God, then it doesn't make sense. But anyways, this is very true. But you see why when you start to talk about metaphysical interpretations of things, you talk about the fractal nature of systems and of people and of how the world works. You talk about the Garden of Eden, the peak of the mountain. You talk about God. You talk about people, neighborhoods, towns, cities, countries, states, globe. People can understand that because they can see it in front of them. But when you start to talk about things like spirituality, you talk about ideas having the same hierarchical structure. People lose the plot because they cannot see those things for themselves. Their brain does not let them comprehend or imagine these things. And so, while there are a few points that I didn't understand in this article, I think overall the synopsis of how different strata of IQ work is pretty interesting. I really enjoyed reading through this, and I think, honestly, I really want to know what, if there are different delineation points between people who are like 100 and 110, 120, 130. Keep it going. Do you need someone who is that smart to then run the study so that they can find these things out? Because I understand what he's saying as well. Like an ant cannot comprehend what a human's doing above it. It's the same way that you can't imagine a four-dimensional being. A four-dimensional being, we are not four-dimensional beings, so you can't imagine something that we can't comprehend. You can postulate, but anything that you postulate is going to be third dimension. It's not going to make sense because you can't understand the fullness of it. This is why people that write off God just don't get it. From an incredibly high level, you're trying to define, quote unquote, a four-dimensional being, a higher being, a greater creation. You're trying to understand that within your limited 3D human brain. just by the nature of it, you can't ever understand it. You can't ever test for it. You can't ever put it into succinct words. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that it can't exist. And particularly like we talk about in IQ, you can see the effects of it. Something that you cannot fully comprehend, you have to piece together. It's the blindfolded men and the elephant. One man's going to see a trunk and say it's a tree, leg, the old parable of all these men blindfolded trying to feel which part of the elephant. They all think it's different objects or different animals. But with enough observation, you can start to see patterns and realize that there's an elephant here because of the effects. Even if you can't see the whole thing, you can understand what it is, given enough information or enough effects from it. So, don't want to get into a theological discussion here, but I think it all plays nicely within itself, because the real thing that I wanted to cover here is just that once you start to understand some of the baked-in differences in people and their capabilities for certain types of thought, it's incredibly illuminating when you're trying to craft a message of change to these people. Insofar as you need to change these people's minds. This is why Christianity, not to get into a theological debate, but immediately jump into a theological debate. Christianity, and I would argue most religions who have been around for a long time, they have these fractal structures to them so that people can enter in at all sorts of different levels. There's a way that an 80 IQ person can understand the Bible and understand Jesus loves me, I go to heaven if I follow Jesus. That's a dummy level entry point into Christianity. Next level, you have more biblical studies. You have parables. You have things like this. Then you have more abstract concepts as you start to go up the theology. And there's all sorts of different levels which the Bible is coherent and makes sense at. This is why atheism is such a huge trap, because basically what people are saying is that we've become technologically advanced enough where we don't need ancient religions, and we completely ignore anything that is immaterial. And that's hubris to its extreme. Just because you think that we have running water doesn't mean that the structure of a 2,000-year-old religion can just be thrown out of the window, because you see people day to day replacing it with what? They replace it with science. They replace it with materialism. They replace it with anything that they can see. And we see now why they do that. They do that because their brain capacity won't let them do a higher level of thinking. This is where you get the midwits. It's the exact this is like the metaphysics of midwits, basically. You need a cohesive fractal structure, a worldview, in order to live a life within our cohesive fractal universe. Anything less than that, you start to get discombobulation. You start to get incongruency. And we're seeing the effects of that. We're seeing what giving people with the inability to think through these conclusions, we're seeing what giving them voting power across the world does to a structure. They reject the true stuff. They make up their own garbage because that's how they feel. And then 100, 200 years down the line, you end up with total chaos. And unless this changes, we're going to get more and more of the same. Things are going to get worse. But the positive news here, the big white pill, is that there are structures already. Christianity is one of them. It is the main one. Particularly in the West. The West needs Christianity. And the West needs Christianity not as Protestantism, because that is just, it's a heretical, individualist offshoot of Christianity. But it needs Catholicism and it needs Orthodoxy, specifically. Because those are the true cohesive structures of Christianity. That's what makes sense. This is why you have icons illiterate people can look at icons and understand the stories of the Bible without having to be able to read. You can also talk to people. The church is a community, so you have communion with the people and with the Eucharist. So you learn things through those communions. And then there's more theological on top of that. You know, it goes and goes and goes. But the real problem is that we've given so much power to the people, and just by the numbers, we see what the majority of people's brains are capable of and how limited they are. And we're expecting these people to be able to come up with their own truth. When's the last time you heard someone say, oh, well, this is my truth? And it's like, you want to give them an IQ test real quick. Like, hey, what'd you eat for... If you wouldn't have eaten breakfast yesterday, how would you think you would have felt last night? Next time someone says that, you should ask them that, and then you kind of know like how much of a deck of cards they're playing with. But really, we've given individualism and liberalism is giving power to people who are not equipped to wield that power. And the premise I understand, because the decisions of the higher ups affect these people and their real lives. And that is true, but giving these ill-equipped people the ability to control their life doesn't make their life better. It's just more likely to fail. And everyone feels like they're smart up until they run off the cliff. So like here's the two different structures. So what doesn't work? Well, both of them don't work, right? Because humans are flawed. Nothing is perfect. So the Pilgrims coming over from the old world, they were fleeing I think it was a theocracy, right? It was like a monarch theocracy. So they were fleeing a top-down structure. They come here, they want to just do whatever they want. They want to start their own country. We're doing whatever I want. Absolute liberty. Everyone here has their own thoughts. Let them do it. And I understand that as a rejection of a hierarchical structure, but what you're doing is you're just giving... It just seems like it'll blow itself up quicker. I don't know. I got to think about that one more, but what you really need is you need both intelligent and wisdom. You need intelligent and wise people to run a country. You need to farm for both of those. You need to incentivize for both of those, because one without the other is disaster. If you are too intelligent, you end up becoming a Disney villain because your autism takes over, and all of a sudden you start doing eugenics programs. Man, can you have too much wisdom? Because I was gonna flip it around and say, like, if you have all wisdom but no intelligence, well, yeah, then you just can't parse data. You just can't look at data. You can't. If you aren't intelligent but you're wise, that's like a street smart person, and that's like a drug dealer. You're too emotional then. You may have wisdom, but you're not going to be able to take in all of the data that you need to make a truly wise decision. So the question is, like, how do we get someone who is both wise? How do we fill our government, fill our structure at the very top with the wisest and most intelligent people? That's the question. And if you can answer that, you have I feel like you have a better structure, something to fight for in replace of a democratic liberal republic. I don't know how to do that, though. I really don't. Honestly, what we're seeing currently is there is a political divide between midwits and between low and high IQ people. And it's pretty easy to farm out someone who, or to split off someone who has like 140 IQ versus someone who has 80 IQ. So it's almost like the job has been done for us. And this is interesting. So there is a political party in Greece right now. It's just a Greek Orthodox political party. But one of their main tenets is that if you are in order to join their Greek Orthodox political party, you cannot have held office or been in politics at any level ever before. This is awesome for regime change. If you institute that law, say we're talking about the United States, you go in, say Trump wins the presidency. Trump wins. He has a conversion where he becomes Greek Orthodox. He says everyone in every government position is fired right now. We will now be hiring for new government officials. Feel free to apply. And he gives cabinet members to people who he knows who are in his team, I guess. Well, I'm trying to think. Maybe this is a bad analogy. It might be a bad analogy, but right now, the dissident right are necessarily intelligent, or they're low IQ and just rebels. And they just get the vibe, they've got the street smarts. So already you can tell by some of the key issues that we're facing right now, who is intelligent and moral. And so it's almost like before things start to take off, you need to just write down a list of people who are real ones right now. And then you fire everyone, just fire them all, and hire people who were there at the beginning, who have proven themselves when there wasn't anything on the line. Or when there was everything to lose but nothing to gain, That's almost what you need to do. Because the problem with most regime changes, the problem with most political movements is they get co-opted at a certain point along the way. Either that or they rely on the authority of the leader, absolutely. And the leader then becomes corrupted. And it's a mix of everything, right? It's all about making a structure that is the most in line with God that we can possibly make. That's the entirety of it. We just need to make a structure that is as in line with God and with reality and with the way of things as we can possibly do. That is it. And in order to structure that, we need to look to worldviews that have lasted thousands of years. There's obviously truth in those worldviews. And then we need to be wise about what we see today and about our response to the current regime. If you can find someone who does those two things, you can start to mount an opposition that makes sense. And I think once you find that perfect balance, I think midwits will be convinced. Sorry, my nose is itching. I don't think you need to convince midwits of anything. So, by convinced, I mean you can sway their opinions. You could call it propaganda, you could call it brainwashing, you could call it convincing. It's all the same form. How do you convince someone who's not capable of understanding your thought process that your thought process is right? That's an interesting question to think about. I'm talking to someone who's below 90 IQ. How do you convince them that the way they think is not the whole picture, to give themselves up and trust in you to look out for them? And then you in turn give yourself up to either a higher man to look out for you and take care of you, and then that man gives his faith to God, Jesus. This is what a proper structure looks like. But how do you convince people in today's day and age to give up their liberty in exchange for a higher order? It's something to think about, because that's what needs to happen. I think that it will happen, though. It happens. It's happened time and time again, so it does happen. I just don't. I'm no historian, so I don't know how that looks or how to replicate that necessarily. It's almost like that's a 4D structure of time that I just can't comprehend how to make it happen. You know, you start looking at history as a four-dimensional being, something outside of our comprehension, and it's like, how do we mold history into the direction that we want it to go? It's like, well, you can't, because it's necessarily a structure that's larger, that it's beyond your comprehension and it's out of your control. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at history, look at what's happened, look at what we think needs to happen, and then act accordingly. Because there's always... It's not completely out of our control. Every person has a bandwidth to work within. Yeah. Okay. Well, I was rambling there for a bit. It's 6:10. We've been going for an hour. It's a nice little show. I've got some more videos here. I'm probably just going to save them. I think that was a good little dive, a little foray into IQ, human potential, and its consequences on our political and social climate. I hope that this starts to give you a little bit of... Let me turn this music down. I hope this gives you something to think about. I hope it starts to give you a little idea of how other people's brains work. You cannot imprint yourself on someone else. You cannot project how you think onto someone else, because it's seemingly completely different. In the same way that a smart person cannot understand not being able to handle basic hypotheticals, a dumb person can't understand what it's like to know how to create hypotheticals. That's pretty profound, and it's just reality. And our society ignores differences in people entirely, and its consequences are showing. They're very apparent right now. So smart people need to get together, and they need to ideate on how they can practically fix these things. There are things to do, and you need to start taking steps, because I'll end on this note. I have this problem a lot where I do this all the time. I think that other people think like me. I take how I think about things and I say, a reasonable person will think how I do on this subject. I should be able to walk them through my thought process. So, starting to understand that is not even possible. If you take that and you chew on that a bit, what does that mean? That means that, oh, okay, so I literally can't convince 75% of our country, or 50% of our country, whatever numbers it ends up being. I literally cannot walk them through why this is the correct decision to make. And as a man, you take that and you say, well, then I need to take control. I need to help them. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a righteous thing to do. Great men throughout history have done that. They've seen a place where they can help. They sacrifice themselves to go and do that for the good of other people, for their family, for God, for their country. All these things. This is the type of man that we look up to. So if anyone watching this feels like they're in that category and feels like they have a problem trying to explain to people simple things, well, why things should happen, why you need religion, why liberty doesn't work, all these things. If you feel like that, you need to take it upon yourself. It's your duty to take it upon yourself and go and change something. So, just noodle on that. We need more great men out here. It's our time. This is always the white pill at the end of the show. Now is the time. We've had the weak generation. They've created the bad times. We're in the bad times. We're starting the bad times. But from the bad times come great men. And you can always be that great man. So if this resonates with you, put down the video games and go do something, you know? Go build something up. That's it. But only if you're 180 IQ or higher. I think I think regime change is the 180 IQ or higher strata. I think that's the cutoff. I wonder why Mensa is cut off at 145. Isn't that true? 145. I want to play with this a little bit too. This is interesting. Okay. So 90 or below is 25%. 100, 50%. So that's just mathematically where it needs to be, right? So 100 and below is half the population. Man, that's crazy. Yeah, I was thinking about it wrong when I was doing some math earlier. Okay, so then you go up 105. 63%. Wow. Man, bell curves are crazy. And this is interesting too. Like, this is interesting too. Is that women have a more consolidated center. So when you're talking about intelligence, it's like most women are midwits, just by genetics. They don't have the dovetails. So where you get like a actually retarded person down here at like 40 IQ, and then up here you have like genius level 169. Like pretty much 100% men live on those extremes. The women's dovetails are way, way smaller. Okay, what about 110? So 110 IQ and below is 75% of the population. Bro, that's crazy. And remember in that article, 110% or 110 IQ, that was when they were writing a story. They have two named characters talking about, each of them talking about two other named characters saying dialogue. So it's literally just one full tree of recursion. 110 IQ people are like just barely getting there. Right? I think I understood that correctly. So it's not even counting anything past that. And he said that the 100 to 110 was like around the place where people were able to start doing that house problem with the arrow mapped onto a street with the house numbers and the yellow to green. That's crazy. If you're watching this, you probably can do that in your sleep. I would imagine. That just immediately popped in your head and you're like, yeah, it's house number 1 is yellow. Easy. Okay. What if we bump it up to 120? 90th percentile. 120. What is average Asian IQ? Because they're higher than whites. They're the highest, right? Koreans, they're around like 115, 110 or 115, right? So their average IQ is 84 percentile. Man, that's wild. What if you're 130? If you have an IQ of 130, this is Joe Rogan's IQ, by the way. If you have an IQ of 130, you're in the 97.7 percentile. So that means if you have an IQ of 130, out of every human that exists, you're in the top 3%. Every human in the world that exists, you're the top 3%. And you probably live in America, which is the top 1% of wealth. And depending how rich you are in comparison to other Americans, like, you may just be a god. You may just be one of the most capable people that's ever lived. And think about that. Imagine having that amount of superiority, not moral superiority, but like capacity, like intellectual, like potential. Imagine having that much potential and then sitting all day and jacking off to porn. That's what people are doing right now. And this is why our society is so sick. Social media, porn, the internet. I mean, it literally is just killing geniuses. The most financial resources, the most intelligent, the top 3%, if you're in this strata. And a lot of these people, because of how our society is set up, are just jerking it all day, every day. They're not able to procreate because they're too anxiety-ridden. They're on SSRIs that fuck with their brain. Or if they're a woman that ends up being this high somehow, then they're on birth control, completely dulling their hormones, dulling their natural thing. And then not only that, the news is gaslighting these people all day, every day. So not only are these people some of the most brilliant people ever to live, they have a structure in place that is telling them every day, you're crazy and you're wrong. Fuck that, man. I'm done. It's time to start believing in yourself more than you believe people on the TV. And that's the end of it. Realize how smart you are. Do some of these numbers. Just guess your IQ. I don't know what my IQ is officially. I think I'm somewhere, I don't know. I think based on my SAT when I did like the conversion, I was around like 120 to 130. But like just imagine it, like, if you're over 100, if 110. So if you're an average white person in America, your IQ is on average 110. So no matter what, you're in the top 25 percentile. You're in the top 75% of people are dumber than you in this entire world. Not to mention the fact that we have better education, better resources here. So you're just better than most of the world. And imagine just squandering that potential on nothing. You know, trust yourself. Go out and do something, you know? Wife's calling me for burritos, so I gotta go eat burritos. Enough of this IQ talk. I'm tired of this dog shit. I'm tired of this garbage. I'm tired of trying to explain breakfast to you literal Neanderthals. How about you guys go get a job? How about you go get a job mopping up a convenience store? How about that? How about you leave me alone? You let me sit in my attic and come up with mad scientist level plans and schemes, and then get gaslit into submission where I'll just go hang out and eat burritos with the fam. How about that? How about you just leave me alone? All right, rock people. Another one in the bin. I'll probably continue this tomorrow. It's a really interesting subject, and it has a lot of implications on how people should act and how people should interact with each other. There's a couple Jordan Peterson videos we can just watch and chill out, have a good Friday. So I'll catch you guys then. Big round of applause for me and for you.
I'm so depressed I don't know what I'm doing.
Later, guys.
Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.